Ready to go? Let's get an update from you.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Hello, everyone. And as Kim mentioned, this is a repeat with a little bit of updated information, just as Microsoft has done some releasing of some of the year-end updates since we did this a couple of weeks ago. The year-end update for GP 2013, 2015, and 2016 have all been released. And of course, with GP 2016, you will get release 2, so you'll get GP 2016 R2. And I realize we don't have a lot of people running GP 2016 yet, but if there happens to be someone out there that does have 2016, when you put the year-end update on, you will be upgraded at the same time to 2016 R2 and get the 23 or 25 new features that are in R2 with your year-end service pack. Of course, if you're on GP 2010 or earlier, there is no more updating for those products, so no year-end update, no more service packs, no future updates for 2010 or earlier. If you happen to be on Canadian payroll, that update will ship any day now. We thought it might be out by the time we did this presentation, but I just checked about 15 minutes ago and it's not there yet, but could come out yet tomorrow or the first of next week. Microsoft is kind of committed to having the Canadian payroll update for 2016 out before this time next week, and so sometime in the next few days. And if you do happen to be a Canadian payroll customer and you're on the call here, you will get the US update along with the Canadian update, so you only have to put one service pack on. You don't have to do the US update and then do the Canadian or vice versa. You'll get everything all together in the Canadian update. So the Canadian update includes the US update for you, and I know there's not a lot of those folks out there, but we do have a half a dozen or so. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about in the next 50 minutes or so is those things that we want to do before we go into the year-end processing, those things that happen during the year-end processing, and then some things that you might be interested in after the year-end process, and some of those involve additional products that you probably own. We'll talk about some things that you might not own that are becoming somewhat common as well, and then we'll talk a little bit about some ongoing maintenance and tools just to help you better manage your Dynamics GP system. The first thing that's always very important around this time of year is to kind of check the version of Dynamics GP you're running. And again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the older versions, there's no year-end updates or no more service packs being released. But if you're on 2013, 15, or 16, there are different flavors of those depending on which service pack you have, or if you put the year-end on last year this time, or if you skip the year-end update and now you're thinking of doing it. It's helpful to know exactly your version number, just so if we're going to help you with that, we'll ask you for that. So we just want to make sure we can get from where you're at to where you want to be, and this is especially true if you're actually upgrading. So if you're running GP 2013 or 15 and you decide to actually upgrade to 2016 R2 as part of the year-end process, then those numbers will be important. And so two common places, if you ever call support and they say, well, what's your exact version? If you're logging into Dynamics, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen there, I actually used my version 2016. And when you're logging in now, the version number is displayed down in the lower left-hand corner where I've got it highlighted in red. If you happen to be inside of Dynamics already and you go to the Help system, which is the little blue question mark all the way up there by the X where you would go to close the program. So in the far upper right corner where the X is, right below that is the blue question mark, and that takes you into Help. And then the very last thing on that Help menu, which is typically the last thing anyway, which is the About Microsoft Dynamics GP. And if you click on that About, then you'll see the screen on the right-hand side open up, and it also has the version information. And the one inside of the help system actually tells you the service pack level, so you'll see I'm on 16.00.0552, but then in brackets it says R2, so that tells you a lot easier that you're on GP 2016 R2 instead of the login screen on the left, which really just shows the number. Then sometimes we have to look that up and see, oh yeah, that actually is R2 type thing. So anyway, if you're ever asked for the version numbers, that's the two quickest places to gather those. Okay, so before year end, before you actually go into the process, and we're not going to actually go through how to close out each module and so forth, we're doing classes on those that Kim, I think, mentioned. And so we're not going to go through that process, but we're going to kind of tell you what you need to do to get ready to go into that process. And so before the year end, and this could be any time, and so it doesn't really have anything to do with putting the year end update on or the service pack on. This is just good general Dynamics GP maintenance. Most of you probably know about check links, and back in the day, if you've been on the software for many, many years, you remember 10, 15 years ago, check links was kind of a commonplace thing that we ran sometimes with our monthly closeout, but not so much required anymore, but it's always a good idea to do it at least once a year, and year end is as good a time as any. And that it does go through and kind of tidy up the database in each module and make sure everything is hooked together the way it's supposed to be. But just like any other process, obviously you want to run a backup before you run check links, just in case something doesn't come out exactly as expected. That's rare, but the few minutes it takes to do a backup is well worth it. I do want to draw your attention, though, if you have some other modules. So there are check links in a couple of the less frequently used modules, but they have their own check links. So you'll see on my screen there I have Project Accounting installed, and so Project Accounting has its own check links menu. Field Service has its own check links menu. And if you're using revenue and expense deferrals in either payables or receivables on the revenue side, deferrals has its own check links. And if you're using analytical accounting, which lots and lots of people are nowadays, there's a separate check links for AA. And so those are not part of what you would get in the very top check links menu choice there. That's just really kind of the core accounting system, including payroll and HR. But if you have any of these other modules, just keep in mind that there are separate check links, and you should do those as well if you're doing kind of the core GP check links. The last thing is reconcile. That's used less and on fewer occasions, but if you have customer balances, for example, that don't appear to be right, maybe you've done a lot of data manipulation with the customers for whatever reason, if you've done lots and lots of credits and then you voided those, and you did debit memos and no, that's not what I wanted, so you void those. Sometimes you can get the system, the balances of customers or vendors can get out of sync from the actual transaction detail. And so the reconcile utility actually reads the transactions and then resets either the customer or the vendor or the general ledger balances based on the transactions. And so typically, unless someone from support, either us or Microsoft, suggests that, that's not something that you would normally do just to do, but certainly doesn't hurt anything. But I just put that up there because sometimes people do have a lot of integrations running and they bring data in from external sources, and sometimes the actual balances don't get properly updated from the integration. the transactions come in okay, but sometimes you might see some odd details in your balances, and so that's what Reconcile actually does, is goes through and massages that data to look at the transactions and make sure that we have the right balance. And it will do the same for General Ledger. That's used a whole lot less, but there is a GL Reconcile as well. Okay, so during the year-end process, the thing that you'll be doing, again, is lots and lots of backups. And so if you attend the year-end class, or if you've gone through the year-end close before in Dynamics GP, you know that every class or every checklist or every book or document you pick up on year-end closeout has lots and lots of backup steps, beginning, ending, and all the way throughout. So, so very, very important. And a couple of things on backup. You can actually back up and restore your company or companies within Dynamics GP, and so there is a utility to do that. And you know, it's very simple. You pick the company. That's kind of the backup company window right in the middle of the screen there. You pick the company, and you tell the system where is a place that you want to put the backup file, and away it'll go. And the message on the lower right side of the screen tells you when the company is backed up, and so you know that it actually happened. You can also back up your Dynamics database, so any company plus your system database. The kind of warning / error message on the left side of your screen that says you do not have sufficient rights to complete this action. Keep in mind that you're actually doing a SQL database task here, not necessarily a Dynamics GP task. It's just there's a window that links you into the server, but you do have to have sufficient rights to actually run this backup and restore routine from within Dynamics GP. And so you have to be logged in either as DynSA, which is kind of the Dynamics System Administrator account, or the SQL System Administrator, which you know is SA. So DynSA or SA are typically the only users that will allow you to actually run a backup and restore from within GP itself. And sometimes IT, they don't want to give out the SA password, so fine, but you could get the DynSA password because that user is unique to your GP system, where SA is kind of holds the keys to the entire SQL kingdom, so to speak. But that's a handy little way to do it if you have access to the DynSA or the SA account. You don't really even need to go to the server to run backups or do restores. Hopefully you don't need the restore. Another feature that is newer, so this came out in GP 2015 R2, and so if you're on 15 R2 or happen to be on 16 already, this will be active. If you're on an older version, so 15 or 13, you won't see this, but it is a handy feature that allows you, kind of you meaning the system administrator, so someone that has the security to get into this part of the software. There's a new utility in the system area that allows you to take your company offline. And so what that does is put it into single user mode, and so that only you, basically, can log into the company. So I wouldn't think you'd take it offline and then have somebody else do the login, but taking it offline will alert other users if they try to log into this particular company. You'll see the message box down at the bottom right there. I'm just copied the screen with the default message that says the company is currently offline for maintenance, try again later. Well, you can toggle that over to custom, and you could type your own message in there, like, you know, you shouldn't be working this weekend type thing. But if someone tries to log in from home or do something in the system while you're kind of running a maintenance routine like check links, or you're putting the year-end update on, of course I wouldn't be able to during that because the system itself takes itself offline. But you know, if you just want exclusive access to your database, to your company, you can now do this, and that's kind of a handy little feature that they've built into 2015 R2. After the year-end process happens, you're really just doing a kind of a final backup. And on this screen, again, you could do that backup within the software, but on this screen I put the backup window from SQL Server, and so if you are used to doing these at the SQL level, these screens will look familiar. If you're not, that's okay. Someone else is doing them for you. You don't necessarily have to be concerned with it. You have some IT help, or it could be us or whatever it might be that are actually doing your backups as you're doing this year-end process. And so, of course, the nightly backups are scheduled to run automatically, but as we're doing things here where we're manually doing backups, this is a way to do it kind of at the server. The only thing that I really put these up here for that might be helpful is if you are doing these kinds of backups at the SQL Server. On the right-hand side, the very bottom there where I've got the file name for the backup, and I've got dyn underscore b4 underscore ye close underscore close. When I do the backups, I usually label them something that will make sense if I ever have to go look at these. If you allow the system to give it a name, it's just going to put a date and time stamp on there, and it's going to kind of get folded into all the other backups that are out there, and that's fine if you don't ever need to go back to it. But it's kind of nice to be able to look at the actual file that's sitting out on the disk and see the name dyn before year-end close November 23. I pretty much know what that is without thinking or looking at the date and time. I know exactly what backup file that is, and I might leave that sit out there for a couple of months, and then as I'm going to clean up drive space and so forth, when I see that, I can tell, oh yeah, I definitely don't need that. I don't have to worry about, well, was that the time just before I did the backup or after? It's a couple of months old, so I probably don't need it anyway. But anyway, just kind of a little common sense thing here is you can change the file name of your backups if you're the one that actually does the backup. The other things kind of as we go through the year-end process and we get on the other side, it's always good to kind of double check your database maintenance. And again, this will be done at the server, and so if you're more of a GP user, then this is just a good thing to ask whoever's maintaining your GP SQL server, to take a look at this. If you're that person, then you'll know probably what we're speaking about here. And so there's a way to have a maintenance utility run on some schedule that will actually tidy up the databases. You can run a few routines. Most people do those once a week. If you have a really large system, you might do those every night. But doing these things, these maintenance tasks, will actually keep the speed as great as it possibly can be if we keep the database clean. So it's just like a file cabinet back in the day of many file cabinets. If you just throw things in there without any organization, it's in the drawer, but when somebody says, hey, can you go pull this document out, it's going to take you a long time to find it, probably, because there's no organization to it. But if you set up folders that are alphabetized and kind of keep track of things, and it's all nice and neat and orderly, then when you go to retrieve that document, you're going to be able to get to it a whole lot faster. Well, it's the same thing with technology, and SQL Server is if we keep the database all organized and maintained, then when we do a lookup inside of Dynamics GP, the server will be able to get to that data a whole lot faster and present it back to us on our screen. GP itself does have some capabilities of keeping the system maintained nicely, and so there is a way to archive historical data. And so why would we do that? Well, some people have data in their live company or companies for 10 or 15, maybe 20 years back. Most people would argue there's a good chance that you don't need quite that much data at your fingertips type thing. And so, if you have the last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever your company policy might dictate is typically pretty good, but you know, we had a client, actually still have a customer, that they're not huge, but they have 5 or 6 GP users, and they have data in their system from the early 1980s. And so they could go look up a sales order from, you know, 1985. Probably don't need immediate access to something from that long ago, but that's their choice. But you know, there's a little bit of a performance issue with that, and so it's just like a massive file cabinet. If you have stuff on your desk from the 80s, and again, you have to go searching through that to get to something from 2 weeks ago, that's going to take you a lot longer than if you just have stuff on your desk from the last month, for example. And of course, every time you upgrade and put a service pack on, all of that data has to get chunked through and touched, so to speak, during an upgrade. So we'll talk about some of the ways to do that. So the first one is at the server, and so this is the SQL maintenance. And this is kind of what it looks like. And again, if this is totally foreign, then somebody else is doing this, you just might remind them or ask them, hey, can you just take a look at the Dynamics database maintenance plans and make sure they're all running and everything looks good, and just kind of have them take a peek at them just going into the new year. And again, typically these types of things where the database is being shrunk down, so there's not a lot of empty space in it. The indexes on all of the tables are reorganized and kind of straightened up, tidied up. That's a good thing to do as a general rule every week. So a lot of people will have this run on, you know, maybe Sunday at 2 a.m. or something when they're pretty sure no one would be in the system. And so if you're kind of the person responsible for it, then it's a good idea to just kind of go check it and take a look and make sure that these are in fact running and you don't need to make any adjustments to them and so forth. But there are some free things, and this is one of them, not related to maintenance, but this is actually an add-on that you can get from the link here that's on the slide. And this particular person does a lot of coding for Dynamics GP, and so he wrote a number of years ago, he wrote a little tool to actually generate the next vendor number or the next customer number or inventory item number. So if you have some kind of a sequential numbering system for your customers or your vendors or your items, this will actually assign the next number for you, so you won't have to go look at the list and say, well, let's see, I just put vendor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there a couple of weeks ago. Now I need to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or whatever it might be. And so this utility will find the next available number and assign that. So that only works if you have a sequential numbering system for customers, vendors, and items. If you don't, then this has no value to you whatsoever. But a lot of people do have a numerical system and try to keep it somewhat in order, and so you might be interested in pulling this down. This screenshot was actually from Dynamics GP 2013, but it is available for 2013, 2015, and 2016 off his website. The other tools that are also available to kind of keep things well organized in the system are the Professional Services Tools Library, or PSTL for short. And this is a screenshot off my system. I've kind of starred some of those that are, I guess, the more popular tools that folks use, and things that are available in the financial area. If you need to combine 2 or more general ledger accounts, so maybe you set up 2 accounts years ago, you've got data in both that's been posted, so as you know, if you have posted transactions, you can't just go delete a master record. And so this would allow you to combine those accounts. And the beauty of the tool is it combines all of the history as if it were in the surviving count or account all along. And so there's no trace then of the duplicate or the second account. Once it's combined, there's no trace of that ever being in the system, and so it merges everything together, gives you a report, so you can keep that for audit purposes if you have outside auditors. They're usually curious about things with the general ledger. If you needed to change a GL account number, so maybe somebody keyed it in and posted a transaction, so now we've got history in there, but it was the wrong number, or you want to move it to a different numbering sequence, the tool will also allow you to modify the GL account number. Same thing with vendors and customers. You can modify vendor names, you can modify customer names. You can also modify customer numbers and vendor numbers, and you can combine vendors and customers. And so we'll see those actually on the next slide, I think. If you have payroll and you want to modify an employee ID, there's a tool to do that. Same thing with your inventory. You can modify your inventory descriptions and your inventory item numbers. So if you want to change an item number, the system will handle that. Of course, you need to run these when people are not doing transaction entry in the system, because you can't, the tool can't start to change something when somebody's using it, and so you have to kind of do these after hours, so to speak, weekends or evenings when other users are out of the software, and you do need SA or Dyn SA access to run these tools. Just kind of an FYI. So whoever holds those user accounts would probably have to be the one to at least get you into the tool here. And then if you have fixed assets, you can modify a fixed asset number. And then the last one way over there on the right, doc date verify, actually works throughout the system, so you can stop people from keying in a document date if that period is closed. And so, and you can stop people from posting to a closed period right now, of course, and that's always been the way it is, but you could have a document date that was different than the posting date. And so some of you probably know what I'm talking about, is you could key in a vendor invoice with today's date, but you could have the posting date go back to November or January 2017, and so you can change those things up. Well, the doc date verify kind of stops that, where the document date has to be in the open period. All of these tools are available for every version of Dynamics GP from version 10 forward, and they're all free, and so there's nothing here that costs any money. And if any of these look like it's something you might use and this is new, you don't know about this, then just let Kim know, and she can get these, get the right people to get these installed for you. But there's no charge at all from Microsoft to grab these tools and use any of them. Of course, you have to be careful, and obviously you want to do a backup just like any process like this. And it's a good idea to do some of this in a test company as well, just so you make sure that you get the results that you think you're getting or you want, especially when you do combining and so forth of GL accounts and vendors and customers. So the two tools that are kind of on a separate menu, these are under the utilities inside of the software, under customer utilities and vendor utilities, and these are just the customer and vendor combiners and the customer and vendor modifiers. And so just screenshots of those, but again, these are part of the free tool set that exists for any version of GP from 10 up through 2016. So let's talk a little bit about archiving data. It's a good idea to, if you've been on the software for a long period of time, say more than 5 years, more than 7 years, and you've never done any archiving, it's usually something to think about. And so there's no technical reasons to do it. You're not going to run out of anything in GP. You're not going to bump up against any limitation in GP. Of course, it's really a matter of disk space controls how much data we have access to, but you are giving the server a little bit of breathing room if you were to kind of archive data, let's say older than 7 or 10 years ago, if you have data in your system that falls into that category and it's still all in your live company, sometimes it's, you're giving SQL Server a little bit of a lighter load if you were to move that into an archive company. And so we talked about the performance increase and kind of how the sorting happens and so forth, but also gives you the ability to upgrade faster or put a service pack on faster. Not that you don't have to upgrade the archive data, but you can do that, and not take time away from archiving or upgrading your production company. And so, you can always get the production company done so people can start to work and then worry about doing the archive company over the weekend or some other time that you're not keeping people out of the software. And as most of you know, there's no limitations whatsoever in GP as far as the number of records that can be stored in there. There's, if you have the hard disk space, GP will keep it. So you'll never run out of room, but it just takes up a little bit more as far as resources every time we have to go through, or the software has to go through, 10 years worth of data, for example. So there is a product which is available, and there's only one that we know of that actually allows you to do this archival, and it's from Professional Advantage, and so it's not part of the core system, so that means it's not a free product, but they have two flavors of it. So there's Company Data Archive Plus, and that you kind of buy like you'd buy GP or any other third-party module. Is you pay a fee and then you pay the maintenance or the enhancement on it, and you get all the future versions and so forth. So as you upgrade, then your Company Data Archive module upgrades or can be upgraded along with your GP upgrade. The CDA actually works with all GP data, so everything can be archived, including project accounting, field service, and fixed assets, which not a lot of people use, but if you do use any or all of those, it's nice to be able to move that data into history if you no longer need it in your live company. Professional Advantage does have a special license and has a much lower price point, and it's called CDA 30, so Company Data Archive, and it gives you a 30-day license to use the tool, and so you can archive like crazy for 30 days. On day 31, from the date they issue the license, on the 31st day, the license expires and the module will no longer work. And so, well, why would you do that? Well, maybe you've never archived and you've been on the software for 10 or 12, 15 years, whatever it might be, and so you come up with a plan to do the archiving and get it on the calendar. So, because again, you have to do some of this when people aren't in certain modules, and so you might be doing it, at times when the system is being lightly utilized, so maybe late in the day or on a day that you don't have a lot of users that need to be in it, and so you decide that, yeah, I can archive 4 or 5 years worth of data, and I'm going to do that in 30 days from the date I get the license. And then after that, you don't want to pay maintenance for this, because you probably wouldn't archive again for another 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years. And so why pay all that maintenance for that period of time when you're not ever going to use that tool for many, many years? And so they allow you to license it for 30 days. There's no maintenance. You just pay a small fee, and they turn it on and it turns off, and then in 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road, you might decide to archive again and then relicense it. And so this is kind of what the screen looks like. It's a screen inside of GP, of course, and you'll see the different modules that we can actually transfer to the archive company. And so here we're telling the system what company are we moving the data from, and so that's the originating company there in red, and then the destination company up at the very top, that's the archive company. And so the system, the CDA system, will transfer. In my case here, I'm transferring the general ledger and payables management into the archive company. I do have the option to check the remove box so that when the data is transferred, it actually then goes back to the originating company and my live company and actually removes it. And so that's really what we're after. We're not necessarily after just making a duplicate of it, because that really doesn't get us anything. Probably makes things worse, because now we've used up more space and we haven't helped ourselves. So typically you would transfer and then remove, but you can do those in 2 steps. And so you can transfer if you like, and you'll see here I'm transferring everything up through 12/31/2013 in my archive date there, the other required field. And so everything up through 12/31/13 is going to get transferred for general ledger and payables into my archive company. Then I can come back, and instead of checking the transfer boxes, I can just check the remove boxes, and the company data archive will just go delete that data out of my production company, and that way, you know, I've accomplished what I wanted to, is I've moved it into another company in the system. And when you log into Dynamics GP every day, provided you have access to the archive company, that will then just be a company that you can pick from the list. So you can log into your live company or companies, and you can log into your archive company if you have access to it. And so it shows up just like a company in the system, just like any other company, and you'll see all of your archived data then being housed over in that company. So you can push that every couple of years. Some people do it every year that have a high volume. They go get rid of maybe the 5th year back every year. Some people do it, like I said earlier, every 5, 6, 7, 10 years type thing. You do have the ability to look at the data that is going to be archived, and so this is a preview, and you'll see that there's a number of reports that print, so you can see what the system is going to move and just make a quick scan and make sure that, again, this is what we want to move is actually going to get moved. And so you can kind of test it or check it before it actually does the movement then. The other way to kind of clean up the system is to delete unused master files, and that sounds kind of dangerous, but as most of you know, if you've been on the software for a while, that you cannot delete a master record that has transactions tied to it. So you can't delete a customer record or a vendor record or an inventory item record or a GL account record. You can't delete any of those if there's transactions hanging out there, and so you're being protected from deleting something that you can't. But you know, sometimes you have things out there that you just don't use anymore that do have transactions, and maybe you have archived the transactions. Well, then you could go delete the transactions out of your live company, your production company, and then delete a bunch of vendors or customers that you haven't seen for years and years and years, just so they're not in the system anymore as an option. Again, they're not hurting anything being there, so there's no requirement to do the deletes, but it's just housekeeping. And so some people do, and some people don't ever delete anything, and that's perfectly okay as well, as long as you have the speed that you need out of your server. But a GL account, obviously you can't delete if there's posted transactions. If that GL account is used in some other journal, like a quick journal, or if it's part of an allocation setup, then obviously the system's not going to let you delete that. Customers and vendors, same rule. Vendors, one exception is if you flag a vendor as temporary, then you can delete the temp vendors that do have transactions, and so that's the only exception to the delete rule, is if a vendor was flagged as temporary when you set it up. Same thing with purging data, and so before we delete the master record, we would have to purge meaning delete the transaction data, and so there is a utility to remove that inside of the system. Again, backups are of utmost importance here. You always should do a backup, even though you kind of know what you're doing. You should do a backup just in case you click the wrong button, the wrong order. You'll see on the screen here that you can remove transactions and accounts. You can select a year. Well, you can, the default range here is all, which means get rid of everything in 2008. Well, you might not want to do that, and so you'd have to go into the ranges button and pick the months or the periods that you want to do the deletion with. Well, you want to make sure you get that right before you click the process button there. And so these are very, very powerful, which means they're very dangerous utilities, but they do allow you to clean the system out from time to time when you need to. And same thing with sales and purchasing. These utilities are all off the menu type thing where you can go in and remove transaction history that's super old and you've decided as a company you don't need to maintain anymore. And you know, if you've archived this data, then this is an okay thing to do. If you haven't archived it, sometimes people will just take a permanent backup every year and go park that someplace. The difference between doing backups and doing the archive is the archive utility actually allows you to add transactions on whatever frequency you want to, yearly, 5 years, whatever it might be. You're adding to the archive database, to the archive company. Well, if you just say, I'm just going to keep a backup, and if I ever need to go back, I can restore it and take a look at it. And so you take your backup before you do the deletes here. That's fine. You just have to maintain that backup kind of every year before you do any deletions, and you have to keep those as long as you want them, and then you'd have to restore and take a look at that old data, and so you'd have to restore it to another company. So it's a little bit clunky to do that, although it does work. But if you needed something from 5 years ago, so you restore that back up, oh no, it's not there, it must have been 7 years ago, so you go get that back up, hopefully you have it, and look in that, and so it's like, oh yeah, that, you know, that's what I'm after. So it's a lot more steps and a lot more kind of management of the data, so to speak, than using something like the company data archive that allows you just to have one database. So it's a company you can log into, it's out there whenever you want it, and you decide whenever you want to push data over there and remove from your live company on some schedule is totally up to you. So same thing with inventory as well. And so there are two things, though, that the software, and some of you probably know this well, the software talks about removing where it's not actually deleting. And so one is paid transaction removal for sales, and of course that cleans up the open transactions in our customer area that are fully applied, moves those into a historical status. So if you're looking at the customer inquiry and you see open, but it's fully paid, and you wonder, well, why is that open? Because it's been paid and it just sits out there. Well, that'll stay open until you run this paid transaction removal routine, and then it will flag those transactions as historical, and they'll say HIST on them instead of OPEN, and that's the process, that's the one and only process that gets sales transactions moved from open to history. And so most people do this on a monthly basis as well. And so that's something you're probably doing right now. And then some people never do it, which is okay. There's no technical reason to do it, but it's, again, harder to find data because all those transactions will stay open forever. And when you're printing aging, you're probably going to see some of that stuff that you don't really care to see when you print the aged receivables. The other one is the remove purchase orders, and so remove completed POs also does not mean delete, it's just moving completed purchase orders to history. And so those two routines, actually, if it were me, I'd change the name of these a little bit and probably not use the word remove or removal, but that's the way it's always been. And so just keep in mind that these are out there and they're not actually deleting when they say remove. So these are the only two exceptions to anything else you see that is flagged remove in the system means delete. Another little feature, again, kind of in the newer versions here, I think this was added in 2013, is the ability to send to users a message. So if you need to have everybody log out during lunch, and you can do email, which is fine, but you can, as an option, use the utility that's in Dynamics GP to send a custom message out, which you'll see on the screen over on the right there where I've got highlighted. You can decide which users should get the message, or you can mark them all and then just click the send button, and that will actually put a Dynamics GP message up. It's not an email message, it's within the system, and so they will, whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter, the message will pop up in front of them. So if they're posting or entering or whatever it might be, it'll just pop the message box, and then they really just have the one option of clicking OK. So the other thing that is a little bit underutilized is the new document attach feature, and that allows you to of course attach documents, which we've been able to do forever, but part of the doc attach feature is gives us the ability to have something come from one of the master records, so a customer master or an item master or a vendor master, and then flow to a transaction. And so you see here on the screen side on the right, I've marked the item maintenance here, where I want any document from the item to actually flow to the transaction. And so, well, what would that be? Well, it could be a schematic drawing of an item. It could be installation instructions that every time we sell that item, we want that document to come over to the sales transaction, and then we can send that to the customer. It could be warranty information. It could be return information. It's really whatever you want. And so as I go in and set this up, in this case, I've set up an image, so I've got a picture, which we've been able to do for many versions now. And so I want this to then flow to my sales order screen. When I put this item onto an order or an invoice, I want the picture to actually come over. And so when I enter an order for that, then I have the ability here on the right-hand side is the document attach window. I have the ability for the system to send that picture over, and that could be a document as well. And so if we, again, had some kind of installation instruction or something and we wanted to go with every order that we took for this particular item, then those documents could come as well. And so there's no limit on how many documents we can have moved over here, but this just automates the process so my order entry people don't forget, oh yeah, I need to send them the instructions or whatever it might be. And so that's a feature that is out there and available, and one that is not fully utilized. The other thing, which is also free here, is some JET reports. And so some of you recognize the name. You might have some of the reports. Some of you probably don't. But JET reports, the company has a product called JET Express for Excel, and JET Express for Excel is free to all GP users. You do have to just register on their site, and once you register, you get a download link within a matter of a few minutes, and you click on it and you can download the Excel plugin, and this allows you to create GP reports from any module inside of Excel and use their prepackaged reports that they've done, and they've got a few dozen that are out there that are already available, and you can use those, hook them to your data and use those or change those if you don't like them. And yes, you can do a lot of this with just Excel and GP without JET in the middle of it, but they have prepackaged all of it and put some wizards into the system so you can connect to the GP data with a wizard instead of just core Excel, and so they just make it a little easier, and it's a little more user-friendly than intimidating, which is what Excel connected to GP directly, you know, unless you're a wizard at Excel, it's sometimes a little bit intimidating. So that's something that you might check out. The last thing for today is business alerts, and this has been in the software probably close to 20 years, and this really is a wizard that allows us to create an alert to do something, generally send a message. It could be an email to someone when something happens in the system. And so what could that be? Well, you'll see on the left there some of the sample alerts that are in the sample company, and if you have the sample company installed, these will all be in there. And so in this case, I picked the checkbook balance. Where the checkbook balance falls below 0, I want somebody to know about that. So 0 is pretty low. You might say when it falls below, you know, some other number where we're getting low, but if it's 0, it's already kind of too late. And so you can use any of these alerts. You can create any on your own. You can modify theirs, and we can help you with this if you get stuck, but it's a wizard. You'll see it's very easy to kind of click through the screens here. This is just saying that when the balance in the checkbook master part of the database is less than 0, I want to know. Now you'll see on the right side that it's set less than 0. Well, that would be very easy to go in and change that 0 to maybe it's when it falls below, you know, $5,000, for example. You want someone to know about it. So these are very easy to edit the alerts that are out there in the sample company already, or just kind of use those as a guide to kind of make up your own if you like. And so here we're going to, the SA user in my system is going to get the message. This could be an email, you'll see. And so, but I'm sending this alert out to another Dynamics GP user, but I could just as easily send it out to someone outside of GP that is totally outside of the company that might need to get the message. And then on the right-hand side here, we're just telling the alert on what is the frequency that you want me to look at the checkbook balance and see if it's below 0. I could do that, you know, every minute. That's probably a little overkill. I could do it maybe once a day, which is how I have mine set, that I'm going to look at 12 a.m., so midnight. I'm going to go look at the checkbook balance and see, is it below 0? Then I want the SA user to know. And so that's maybe a little too lax, but you know, something in between. You decide the schedule there, so you've got lots of choices. And so that's a feature that you know, you might find a use for because it is part of the system and doesn't cost anything to turn on. You all own it, regardless of what version you're on. And so anyway, I think, Kim, we're right pretty close to time here, but those are just some of the things that hopefully will help you to get ready for the year-end process, get through it, and then some things maybe to think about after the year-end on some productivity tools and maybe cleaning up the data a little bit. But anyway, Kim, any questions or comments that we have?
Yes, we do have questions. So the first one here comes from Cynthia. It says, where do we send out our requests for the free tools Brian just mentioned? Email me. How about that? User experiences at InterDynBMI.com, and I'll help you out, Cynthia. All right. How does financial reporting on the older years, if you have archived those years into a new company?
So that's a good question. You can, depending on the tool you're using, so if you're using FRX or if you're using Management Reporter or if you do something with JET reports, you can get to any company in your GP environment, and so that's not a problem at all for the FRX Management Reporter style reports. You can still access any of that data for your financial reporting. If you're using SmartList to pull data, of course SmartList just on its own, you'd have to log into the archive company and extract data, but if you happen to be using SmartList Builder or the free SmartList Designer module, those tools can read across companies, and so you would want to go in and hook your archive company up if you want to pull things like SmartList. If you're running just core GP reports, kind of the old style off the menu reports, you'd have to log into that archive company. So if you want to run a trial balance just off the menu, you'd log into the archive company and you would have to run the trial balance out of the archive, and then in your live company you'd run the trial balance out of that. The idea is you don't archive stuff that you're using a lot, and so if you do a lot of reporting and so forth and you're still looking at the detail, payables, receivables, inventory, things like that out of the archive data, it's probably not a good idea to archive it. You really want to archive things that you touch very, very infrequently, and maybe just financial statements, and that of course is very simple to do with MR or FRX. So.
All right. Denise asked the question, the feature to send a message if the user's away and returns and goes into GP, will the warning message pop up?
Yes, it does until they actually acknowledge that they've read it, yes.
All right. Would Jet Reports offer more than SmartLists?
Well, that depends, and it really does depend. It is Excel-based, and so it's a different way of kind of looking at reporting, but as a rule, yes, SmartList is good for extracting data in kind of a simple form, and you can push that data to Excel if you want to make a real nice report on the SmartList data. Well, with JET, you're kind of bypassing the SmartList step and you're just bringing the data directly from GP into Excel. And then if you want to do a pivot chart, if you want to create a graph or any kind of calculations or anything that you would normally do in Excel, you have that data there ready to work with. But yeah, that's kind of a hard one to say. It just depends on what you're doing. But for the most part, you've got all the power of Excel in JET. So, yes, it I guess in theory would be better than SmartList.
All right. Okay, here's another one. And the question is FRX, same question.
Yeah, so yeah, probably you'll have more flexibility with JET because JET reads all modules in GP, including third parties, where FRX and Management Reporter only look at the general ledger, just the financial module, and extract GL data. You can do all of that with JET and more. So if you wanted to put general ledger data along with sales data on one report, that's possible with JET because Excel doesn't care or know that it's financial versus sales, where FRX and MR, you're kind of restricted to just the GL.
All right. Okay. And then the email address, just to repeat that for you, it's userexperience@interdynbmi.com. That's a catch-all email that comes to me, so then I can help you out. So hopefully that got through. All right. Sheila asked the questions. Can you give us the URL for JET Reports again? Yes. So matter of fact, Sheila, why don't you email me at userexperience@interdynbmi? Because matter of fact, we even have a webinar recording that talks about the migration over to JET Reports, and I can help you out with that information. There you go, Brian. And I've got a copy of that as well if you'd like to get a copy. So again, just email me. Okay. All right, Brian, we've gone through the questions. Anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I think that's it. Happy holidays to everyone that's on the call.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, if there's any other way we can help you, want to get yourself scheduled for payroll or year-end processes, make sure that you get in touch with us and we'd be glad to help. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everybody. Talk to you soon. Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.